You think the fall of Constantinople was inevitable. You're completely wrong. When Ottoman cannons breached those legendary walls on May 29th, 1453, people talked about it like some unstoppable force of history, the mighty Turks finally defeating the weakened Greeks. But here's the thing that nobody tells you. Constantinople had already been sold off piece by piece over the previous 200 years. The city fell not because the Ottomans were that powerful, buddy, but because the empire that built those walls was already hollow, drained by debt and abandoned by the very merchant republics that once called themselves its allies. This wasn't a story of inevitable decline. This was a story of systematic economic exploitation by merchants who understood power better than emperors. Let me take you back to the real economics of this collapse. By 1400, the Byzantine Empire was basically a financial corpse, held together by desperation. The empire that once controlled 3 continents now controlled only Constantinople and a few surrounding territories. Why? Because the Venetians and Genoese had systematically dismantled Byzantine wealth for over 200 years. These merchant republics controlled Mediterranean trade, the spice routes, the Silk Roads, all the money flows that gave empires their power. They deliberately starved Constantinople of revenue through a system of trade monopolies and political domination. This wasn't an accident of history. This was deliberate economic warfare conducted by merchants who understood that controlling trade routes meant controlling empires. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 is where this really started, my friend. Venetian merchants financed the crusade knowing it would eliminate their biggest trade competitor. Constantinople's wealth flowed directly into Venice's coffers for the next 57 years. They strip-mined the empire's treasuries, controlled trade, and set themselves up as intermediaries. That's the first blow. And it worked perfectly. For 57 years, Venice harvested Byzantine wealth. Fast forward to the 15th century. Constantinople was dying economically. The empire's tax revenue had collapsed because Venetian and Genoese merchants controlled all the ports and trade routes. They paid tributes to Turkish sultans, not to Byzantine emperors. The Byzantine treasury was essentially empty. Emperor Constantine XI had maybe 5,000 defenders for walls that stretched for miles, 5,000 soldiers defending the greatest city on earth. That's what happens when an empire loses its economic base to merchant republics who care more about profit than loyalty. The merchants controlled the economic arteries. They decided what money flowed in and what flowed out. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The Genoese literally played both sides during the siege. Galata, the district across the harbor, was controlled by Genoese merchants, a separate political entity answerable to Genoa, not to either emperor. These guys signed a non-aggression pact with Mehmed II right before the siege started. While Constantine XI prepared to defend with his 5,000 men, the Genoese negotiated guaranteed safety and trading rights, with the man attacking him. While Constantinople burned, Genoese traders sold supplies to the Ottoman army. They weren't neutral. They were profiting from destruction, selling food and weapons to Mehmed, while refusing to allow those supplies to reach the defenders. The Italian merchants had more interest in maintaining trading position with the Ottomans than defending Christendom. But let's talk about something even more fundamental, the cannons themselves. This is where the economics really matter. Mehmed's famous supergun was designed by a Hungarian engineer named Urban. Here's the thing people don't realize. Urban was originally offered work by Constantine. The emperor wanted those cannons. He approached Urban and offered him a contract. Urban evaluated the terms and walked away. Why? Because Constantine offered money that the empire didn't actually have. The emperor was penniless. He couldn't pay a skilled engineer to build weapons to defend his capital. Urban took his talents to Mehmed, who could pay him. Mehmed offered money, land, and status. Urban was an engineer seeking patronage in a world where patronage equals resources. The Ottomans could provide those resources. The Byzantines couldn't. So Urban designed massive cannons, some reports say 26 feet long, capable of firing 600-pound stone balls. Because economic reality made clear which empire had a future and which was dying. This tells you everything about the power structure at this moment in history, my friend. It wasn't Greek military superiority versus Turkish barbarians. It wasn't a clash of civilizations. It was a wealthy empire that could mobilize resources versus a bankrupt relic that couldn't even pay a skilled engineer to defend its capital. Money determined the outcome. The cannons that broke Constantinople's walls weren't built because Mehmed was militarily genius. They were built because economic reality made it clear which empire had a future and which was dying. Mehmed had money. Constantinople didn't. The actual siege lasted 53 days. Mehmed's army numbered around 80,000. The defenders numbered in the thousands. But even with overwhelming force, the walls held until a small gate was left unsecured, possibly by negligence, possibly by traitors. We don't know for certain. But here's the crucial part. Why didn't reinforcements come? Why didn't Venice or Genoa send help to their former trading partner? Why was Constantinople left to die alone? Because they had already calculated the math. They had run the numbers and made a decision. Because they had already decided the Ottomans were a better bet for future profits. This wasn't an emotional choice or a religious schism. It was a business calculation. The merchant councils in Venice and Genoa gathered and asked themselves, what's more profitable, defending a bankrupt empire that can't pay, or establishing trade relations with a rising Ottoman power that controls more territory and has more resources to extract? Venice and Genoa immediately signed trade treaties with the Ottoman Empire. We're talking days or weeks after the city fell. The Ottomans controlled even more territory now. More routes, more monopolies on goods flowing to Europe, more power to tax merchant ships. The merchant republics calculated that an Ottoman empire that owed them trade favors was more profitable than a dying Byzantine empire that couldn't pay its bills. They ran the numbers. Constantinople was finished as an economic force. Mehmed's Ottoman Empire was ascendant. The choice was clear. It was pure economic calculation. No religious conviction, no loyalty. No sentimental attachment to shared Christian history. Just money flows in which direction they were moving. Constantine XI died defending his city. That part's actually true and genuinely heroic. The accounts say he died fighting on the walls rather than surrender. That's the kind of personal honor that should matter, and in human terms it does. But his heroism couldn't overcome 200 years of systematic economic destruction by the same people who claimed to be Christian allies. The empire fell because it was poor, not because it was weak. It was poor because powerful merchant interests had deliberately drained it to maintain their monopolies on Mediterranean trade. Individual courage is meaningless without the material resources to back it up. Soldiers need food, weapons, ammunition, and support systems. When an empire runs out of money to provide those things, all the courage in the world can't sustain a defense. The economics are crystal clear. The merchants didn't need the Ottomans more powerful than Constantinople. They needed Constantinople weaker, weak enough for conquest, weak enough that resistance was economically inefficient. Defending a bankrupt city that couldn't pay was inefficient. Supporting a rising Ottoman power was efficient. The choice was made by merchant councils calculating profit. The fall of Constantinople is taught as a military event, Mehmed versus Constantine, cannons versus arrows, Turkish versus Greek. But the real story is about economics. It's about how trading monopolies can hollow out even the greatest empires from within. It's about how merchants will switch sides instantly if the math works better. It's about how military strength means nothing without the economic resources to sustain it. Constantinople had the best walls in the world. But walls don't defend themselves. Soldiers defend walls. And soldiers need food, weapons, leadership, and resources. The empire had none of those things because 200 years of Venetian and Genoese commercial domination had drained the imperial treasury. Here's what I want you to remember, buddy. When people talk about great historical turning points like Constantinople's fall, they're almost always leaving out the profit motive. Someone made money. Someone calculated that change was more beneficial than stability. The Ottomans got an empire. The Genoese got their trade agreements and trading colonies that would continue operating under Ottoman rule. The Venetians kept their wealth and immediately began trading with the Ottomans at even more favorable terms because the Ottomans had more territory and more resources to extract. Only Constantinople's people got nothing, just conquest, slavery, or death. They got history and a false narrative about inevitable decline when the real story was systematic economic exploitation by merchant republics who viewed empires as nothing more than sources of profit. History isn't written by inevitability or military genius. It's written by whoever controls the money flows. When money flows change direction, when some group realizes they can profit more from a different outcome, empires fall. That's how the world actually works.